Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. At the time, I was a third-year apprentice chef going for a job interview, and they told me to arrive in my chef uniform, as the interview is also an audition that you have to make a dish that they ask for. So I did everything and was told we will call you. Still in my chef uniform, and I was hungry and thought, why the hell not, I will place an order. While I was waiting, I did notice a table of ladies watching me, but did not say anything at all. My food arrived, and I was scoffing it down as I have to go back to my job as soon as I was not on a split shift. I was on a straight and was given an hour's break. Then I noticed someone was standing next to me with a plate of food in their hands looking at me. I said hi and continued to keep eating. They got my attention again and started to look upset with me, which I have no idea why. I ordered a well-done steak. Does this look well done to you? They asked if I looked at the plate and wanted to laugh, but did not. No, it looks medium well in your point, I asked, not caring as I wanted to finish so I can get back to work. She slammed the plate in front of me. Food went flying. Lucky for her, nothing landed on my plate. Instead of enjoying your food, maybe you should cook the way your paying customers had asked for. She snapped. I looked at her in shock. What you think I work here, love? Sorry, I do not. I'm just having lunch. Then I'm gone. Maybe go ask that person for help. I told her. She looked pissed. No, you're a chef. You got the clothes on. Go back into that kitchen and cook my food the way I had asked and paid for. I rolled my eyes now as I had enough of her yelling at me. Listen here, lady, I was here for a job interview and they told me to wear my uniform, which I am. I did not cook that steak for you. As you know, I do not work here. Please go talk to the front of house. They can actually help you as I do not work here. I snapped because if you looked at my chef jacket, it had bright pink Word of Sugar, which was the name of the cafe I worked at, with pink buttons and pink and white checkered chef pants. This place is straight up black jackets with white or black buttons and gray small checkered chef pants, the head chef worn all white. So I was shocked that she went to continue on yelling at me. And that was when I noticed the head chef walking over towards us asking what was going on, and she turned on him. Your young staff member here is refusing to recook my steak. The head chef smiled at me then at her, maybe because she doesn't work here. But please bring your plate with me and tell me what is wrong with it. She looked at him in shock. She doesn't work here, she asked. I smiled at her. Like I said, I don't work here right now. I snapped, finished off the last bite, and walked off, leaving her stunned. I ended up working at that place, and turns out she is always complaining about her food, but she keeps coming. This happened about 5 years ago. I was working part-time at an Ace Hardware. I had semi-retired the year before, so I just wanted to work part-time to keep busy. I had got off of work and headed towards the local Walmart, where my wife was working to pick her up after she had finished work. I had gone into the store to pick up a few things instead of just waiting in the car. I was wearing khakis and a light blue polo with the Big Ace logo on the left chest side, also wearing black shoes. Being that I was the paint specialist, I wore different colored polos instead of the usual red one worn by Ace employees. As I was going by the hardware area headed towards the auto area, I heard, Ace is the place which when I looked over came from, we will call him Joe, a Wally World employee who was behind the paint desk. I knew Joe. We met a few times when I was shopping with my wife, so we knew each other. Joe was trying to help a customer of his but was having some trouble. Joe had worked in the hardware department area for around 6 months and was a real good kid who wanted to learn, and I have worked in the paint, home improvement, hardware, etc. fields for 38 years. Joe asked me politely if I could help. The customer asked his questions. I gave answers as well as helpful hints on how to do his project. The customer got what he needed and thanked me and Joe and went on his way. Joe thanked me and asked if the wife was getting off soon, which I replied in about 10 minutes. We chatted for a few minutes and then I went over to Auto to get the wipers I needed. Walmart has that little computer thing where you punch in all the information, make, model, etc., and it will tell you what you need. I found 121-inch wiper and was digging through the mess looking for another when I heard the dreaded, "Excuse me." I turned to look and found standing next to me, the typical Karen. Karen's hairstyle, huge sunglasses. She was in her 40s, dressed way too nice to be shopping in a Walmart and with enough gold chains to make Mr. T jealous. All the cast of characters are as follows. Paint guy me, Karen Joe, the good Walmart employee, one of the Walmart managers, Walmart security, Cop 1 and Cop 2. Karen, you took your sweet time in helping that customer in paints, so now you will help me. I need wipers for my BMW. Me, trying to be nice. If you don't know how to use the computer here, I can show you. No, you will get them for me. That's why you work in this dump, so you do your job. I don't work here, lady. Yes, you do. You are helping the man in paints and you are wearing the uniform. Pointing to my chest pocket, I say, does this say Ace Hardware or Walmart? Ignoring my pointing, she says, you will get me what I want or I will get your manager and get you fired. At that point, I had enough of her nonsense. I grabbed my second wiper and turned and started to walk away. She then started to scream, where do you think you are going? Get back here! Where is your manager? I am getting you fired. A few seconds after the word fired came out of her volcano lips, I felt a hand grab my left shoulder and dagger-like nails dig into my skin in my upper chest area. Note, back in 2001 I was diagnosed with sarcoma cancer, which was in my upper left chest area. They removed all of the cancer, muscle, whatever padding I had, and all that was left was a thin layer of skin. Her nails pierced the skin. I yelped. I grabbed her wrist with my right hand, squeezed her wrist hard and yanked her hand off of me, and as I turned to face her and pushed her away from me. She stumbled backwards and fell against the counter and then her butt. She is sitting on the floor screaming that I attacked her. At this time, Joe came around the aisle. I yelled at Joe to get a manager and security. I then opened my polo and put my right hand in to check as my chest hurt. Yep, I was bleeding. She had torn skin. I grabbed some tissues to put in place. At that time, one of the managers and the security came running over. Manager, what's going on here? Karen, your employee attacked me. Karen was helped to her feet by the manager and the security. Which employee? Him, pointing at Joe. Karen. Nah. Him, pointing at me. He doesn't work here. He works for Ace Hardware as per his shirt. I want him fired. I want him arrested. I'm going to sue. In the meantime, the security came over and was talking to me. I told him what happened and I think that they should call the cops. He also called the emergency medical technicians as the tissue I was using was now blood-soaked. Karen is still screaming. Karen, I want him fired. I want him arrested. He assaulted me. He tried to do things against my will. She just kept going on and on. She was yelling down the aisle at me as well as the security guy and the one manager. The security told Joe to get me a chair as well as a bunch of towels, and also try to get a hold of my wife as well. After about 10 minutes, 2 cops came in. Cop 1 went and talked with Karen, who kept adding more crimes against her. Seems not only I beat her up, then tried to do stuff against her will and then steal her purse. Cop 2 came to talk to me. By this time, the emergency medical technicians and my wife were with me. My shirt was off and my upper chest was bloody and trails ran down my stomach and were starting to stain my khaki. The manager and security were with Karen. The emergency medical technicians and my wife were with me. The cops were in the middle of aisle talking. Cop 1 called over the security guard and asked to see security footage. The 2 went off. Karen got real quiet when security cameras were mentioned. After about 10 minutes, the emergency medical technicians finished up and wanted to take me to the hospital, but I declined. Cop 1 and the security guard came back and came over to me. The look on Karen's face with that smile like she won. The cops, in low voices, asked me if I wanted to press charges, which I said yes. They both turned and headed towards Karen, and when the one cop pulled out his cuffs, she screamed, "Arrest him, not me," and threw her purse at Cop Shone and hit him in his face and turned and started to run. But Cop 2 did a flying tackle and took her to the floor and had her cuffed in under a minute. She was charged with assault, giving false police reports, assaulting a police officer, resisting arrest, etc. I myself had to have my arm in a sling for several weeks so that it would heal. I had to wear this gooey covered gauze while it did. Backstory. A close friend of mine was adopted by a lovely old couple who had already adopted a girl who had been blinded and had major scarring around her eyes important. The couple also had big dogs, the latest generation of which was a cross between a half-husky, half-German shepherd. They had puppies with an Irish wolfhound. So very big, very hairy, and absolutely gorgeous doggos. They had one of these puppies trained to be a blind assistance dog for their blind daughter, as well as being trained for general help around the house. During this process, the dog got very close with the blind girl and very protective. Important. Anyways, on to the story. All names are fake. Cast. Bella, my friend. Zoe, the blinded girl, my friend's adopted sister. There's also the adopted father, Echo the service doggo, and of course the entitled mother and her brat kid. On to the incident. I'd gone round to Bella's house to see her and to get her help with some schoolwork I was doing. After finishing the work, me, Bella, and Zoe decided to go out for a walk and take Echo with us to give him his daily exercise. As this would involve going outside, Zoe put on a headscarf and very large, dark sunglasses to hide her scars, as well as taking her white cane. Together we walked to a nearby park playing field and let Echo off the lead to run him around. After about 20 minutes, we noticed a typical K-Wren and her hellspawn come onto the field. I called Echo over and put his lead back on him, and also put his service vest on, a high-vis vest with service dog, do not pet written in big letters on both sides, so it is obvious he is working. Echo, being very well trained immediately, went into service dog mode and was helping Zoe navigate around the field. We went and sat on some benches outside the play area, about 10 meters away from Karen. Echo sat down about 2 meters away directly in front of our bench. We were just chilling and chatting when we hear squealing and running footsteps. The entitled kid had seen Echo. Before we could react, the kid had sprinted over and charged straight into Echo, knocking him over and obviously hurting him as he yelped and was frantically wriggling as the kid tried to pin him to the ground while shouting, "Mummy, Mummy, look at the doggies!" Karen didn't move or even look up from her phone. By now, Echo was in obvious distress, and Bella stood and grabbed the kid, lifting him off the dog and putting him down away from him whilst telling him to please not touch our dog. The entitled brat screamed and shouted incoherently, and as soon as Bella put him down, he punched her straight in the stomach, which made her drop the kid and tried to tackle Echo again. This time, however, he was ready and shied away, causing the kid to trip and start crying. As if summoned by the cries of her hellspawn, the entitled mother leapt to her feet and began screaming at us. "What are you doing? I can't believe you'd hurt a child," etc. All this shouting was freaking Zoe out, and she started shaking. "Bella, ma'am, your child attacked my sister's service dog. Please, can you take him away?" Karen looked at Echo's vest and said, "Well, you shouldn't bring your service dog to a public park then, you brat." Unfortunately, Zoe chose this moment to speak. "Guys, can we get out of here?" The entitled mother saw Zoe's headscarf and glasses and launched into a tirade about disrespect and terrorists. "And look at me when I'm talking to you," and grabbed Zoe's headscarf and glasses, pulled them off her and threw them on the ground. Two things happened nearly instantly. Karen began screaming in horror at the scars on Z's face, and the entitled kid launched himself at Echo again. This time, Echo snapped. He had been attacked and hurt, and now his child was being threatened. Echo sighed, swiped the kid in midair, then shoulder charged into the entitled mother before standing in front of Zoe, showing his teeth and barking. Still screaming, the entitled mother pulled out her phone and called the police while dragging her child away and yelling at us that, "You're all going to jail for scaring my child and bringing that into a public place." Zoe was understandably traumatized, so we rang her father to come and help us. Their father and the police arrived at the same time. He came over to us to talk, and the police officer took the entitled mother's statement, then came to talk to us. After talking to Bella and their father, the police officer asked if Echo had bitten the kid. We all said no, just knocked him over. The police officer then said that the kid had cuts on his arm. Turns out the mother had deliberately cut her child to make it look like Echo had bitten him. Whilst we were being questioned, we had been taken about 5 meters away from the bench. The entitled mother had let the kid go back to the park. Zoe was still sitting on the bench and Echo was laying next to her. The kid decided to try again and came charging over to Echo. This time, however, their father stepped in and told him that he couldn't touch the dog as he was a service dog. The entitled mother saw Bella and Zoe's father talking to her child and flew into a rage, shouting about assault, and then shoved their father out of the way, grabbed Echo's lead, knocked Zoe to the floor, and tried to run all in about 5 seconds. As the cops ran to grab her, Echo launched himself into the air to run back to Zoe, pulling the entitled mother over, making her graze her arms. As she was being detained, she was shouting about how Echo was an aggressive dog and needed to be put down, only to be told she was being arrested for assault and public order offenses. Long story short, the entitled mother got fined and 8 months jail time and had paid Zoe and her father each something close to $5,000 for damages. Zoe still hates going out and had 2 fractured ribs from that evil kid. The dad came to pick the entitled kid up and has since divorced Karen and got full custody of the evil kid. 6 months after the incident, he went to my friend's house with the kid to force him to apologize, which the kid did, then explained that his mom told him that was how he should act around dogs. Hopefully, the dad can make sure he grows up to not be entitled. So, I'm this dude from Poland, right? Yeah, sorry for my English, not my first language, and all that. Anyways, let me tell you about this crazy shit that went down when I was crashing at my mate Stuart's place in Dahab, Egypt. Now, Stuart and his Mrs. Tully are this super chill English couple I met on a diving trip. Dahab's this dope spot for diving, by the way. So, their house was buzzing because I knew how to throw a damn good party. Now, I gotta set the stage here. Dahab is this awesome coastal town with a laid-back vibe. People from all over the world flock here for some killer diving spots, and it's become a bit of an expat haven. Stuart and Tully are English, like most of the folks in our crew. It's one of those typical Dahab evenings. Warm breeze, stars out, and a house full of folks looking for a good time. Stuart and Tully's place is packed, but that's how they roll. They're the life of the party, and I'm just soaking up the good vibes. So, Karen, she's this woman none of us really know. She stumbles into the house like she owns the joint, which right away ain't cool. She's got this, I don't know, disheveled look, and you can just tell she's had a few too many. Okay, maybe more than a few. Karen heads straight for the liquor cabinet. You know, that spot where you stash the good stuff? She's pouring herself a glass of whatever she can find, and it's not just a regular-sized glass, mind you. It's more like a chalice. She's chugging it down like it's water, and I'm starting to feel a bit uneasy. Stuart, being the host with the most, tries to be polite and tells Karen, hey, maybe go easy on the liquor. Man, you should have seen her face. It twisted up like a Halloween mask, and she starts slurring her words, telling Stuart, mind your own bloody business. Tully, bless her heart, tries to mediate. She's like, come on, guys, let's not ruin the evening. But Karen, she's not having it. She's not having it. She's got a fire in her eyes, and it's not the good kind. A few minutes pass, and guess what? Karen's back at it, pouring another drink. Stuart's not having it this time. He steps up and says, look, you've had enough, and there's not much left for the others. Karen, she goes off like a rocket, swearing, cursing, and she even calls Stuart a wanker. I can't help but chuckle at that one. But then things take a crazy turn. She reaches into her bag, and I kid you not, she pulls out a freaking gun. My heart's pounding like a drum at this point, and I'm thinking, what kind of house party is this? Stuart, he's not backing down, though. He's like, put that away, Karen. You're not going to scare us with that. Tully, she's on her phone, probably calling the cops or something. But Karen, she's too far gone. She's waving that gun around like she's in an action movie or something. It's total chaos. Finally, Tully manages to get through to someone, and she's whispering to them like her life depends on it. Karen must have sensed the tide turning because she bolts out of there, gun and all. I'm pretty sure she didn't pay for all the booze she drank either. The cops show up, and Stuart and Tully tell them everything. Turns out Karen's got a history of causing trouble in town. She's one of those alcoholic troublemakers who just can't stay out of it. The next day, word spreads like wildfire. Dahab is a small town, and news travels fast. Nobody wants anything to do with Karen after that night. She's basically public enemy number one. People start avoiding her like the plague, and she's pretty much exiled from the expat community. Stuart and Tully, they're shaken up but relieved that everyone's okay. We spend the next few days talking about how crazy that night was, and it's become a legendary story in our little group. But you know what? Despite the insanity, that night in Dahab is one for the books. It's a reminder that even in the most peaceful and chill places, you can run into some real characters. So here's to Stuart and Tully for handling that wild night like absolute champs, and here's to Dahab for keeping its laid-back spirit alive, even in the face of chaos. Cheers, mates. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. In September of 2020, the apartment next to mine was let out to two young women, both students. After they settled in a bit, it turned out they wanted to have a party. No big deal, except Belgium was in full lockdown at this point due to COVID, and you were supposed to only have one fixed visitor over. But then again, to be young again, etc., so I didn't really care. During this time, I was working in healthcare. I work with the mentally disabled, but I volunteered for the ad hoc COVID team, meaning I got called upon to tend to those residents who were sick and needed quarantining, or were effectively diagnosed with COVID. This meant pretty long working hours, and I spent about 10 to 11 hours a day at work, with a full-hour bike ride to and from work. Needless to say, I was pretty tired pretty much all the time. So I wasn't looking forward to the noise from a party, but I'm pretty chill and know that living in the city, some noise is to be expected. So they're having their party, and I can stand some noise and music, but this party was damn wild. People shouting full on in the hallway, wrecking things, etc., etc. At about 4 in the morning, I introduced myself to the neighbors and asked them when they could expect their company, 20 people, to leave, and if they could refrain from having a party the next day, as I have to work and get up at 6 every day. So they promised they would keep it down the rest of the night. They didn't, and that they wouldn't have a party the next day. Plot twist. They did have another party, and then did another one the day after. At this point, I had been going a full 3 nights without sleep and was nearing neurosis. Every night I had talked to the girls, and every night they would be full of apologies and stuff, but nothing would change. I also felt terrible when I had to enter their place because it would be absolutely packed with people, and I work with some very vulnerable people at work who I wouldn't want to spread COVID to. This was pre-tests, pre-vaccines, pre-much of the knowledge we now have about COVID. Luckily, the weekend came and they went to their parents and I could recover a bit. Suffice to say, I wasn't really liking my new neighbors. During the next few weeks, they refrained from big parties, but they would have a constant flood of people coming over during the night. And by constant, I mean constant. Like their bell would ring 70 times a night, and people would always be coming or going. And those people would be drunk and loud. Our communal hallway is pretty much an echo chamber because it's all stone and any noise will travel throughout the building. Basically, I couldn't rely to sleep at night. It drove me crazy. I could only sleep Friday through Sunday because then they would go off to their parents or whatever. I couldn't grasp how they could know this many people that would always be coming and going. During one night, while knocking on their door to complain about the noise, I encountered my upstairs neighbor and decided that we would have to join forces to get this to stop. My neighbor told me some important bit of information. The reason there were people coming and going all the time was because they used their apartment as a makeshift bar hangout. During this time, bars were closed due to COVID, and all those students were using the big apartment to hang out. Moreover, across the street was another frat house with 5 boys living there, and that too was a secret hangout. So people would hang out at those 2 places and cross the street if they wanted a different atmosphere or wanted to see their other friends, etc., etc. And the boys from across the street would also come over 15 times a night. Most visitors seemed to be law students or affiliated with them. Basically, our communal hallway was just a part of their cafe space now. So we tried talking to the girls. Then we started to talk to the visitors. None of them had any sympathy for us when we were asking them to be quiet at 4 in the morning. Most of them just laughed at us as we were pesky neighbors, no doubt. Even more of them were just so wasted that they didn't know what they were doing. So we started calling the police dozens of times. Most of the times they weren't let in and police told us they couldn't do anything. We kept calling as we wanted a record of our calls in the system. Belgium was still in full lockdown at this point, and what they were doing was full-on illegal. Even so, police told us their hands were tied if they wouldn't open the door. When the police couldn't help, I turned to the next best thing. I'm a social worker, and so I have no problems looking up information and calling around to look for help. This is what I did. Most places, student unions, police, town hall, were understanding but couldn't really do much. So I acted on the suggestion of the upstairs neighbor and contacted one of the girls' deans. I shot him a nice email about sorry to have bothered him and taking up his time, but I had this big group of students from his faculty ganging up every night, and maybe he wanted to know about it since they were breaking every possible COVID rule that existed at that time. Especially since me and my neighbor were about to go to the papers with this story as secret lockdown. Parties were becoming a thing in the papers at this point. This dean called me back right away, and we had a nice talk about our problems. He told me he was on it. So basically what he did was call the law student girl and her parents. Big drama ensued, and we finally got to sit down with the girls, and it finally sounded like they were sorry. Tears were shed, for which I had no patience, to be honest. We learned that the police had actually been inside a few times, and they were issued tickets for having secret parties. Those were €300 each a pop, so no idea why they didn't just stop. We learned they were not happy because the dean had called them up at 11 o'clock and they were still asleep. To which I said, well, there is your problem. You are still asleep at 11 o'clock. I'm up at 6 every day, and you girls haven't been a bit understanding about that. So we got to feel a bit like we got our revenge and we got to vent, but we kept it kind of nice and parted in good terms, hoping that this would have been it and we could live together as nice neighbors. But if that were the case, I wouldn't be here, right? You'd think they would have gotten the point now and would refrain from making noise and partying. Well, you'd be wrong. Basically, what they did was they moved to the frat house across the street and started partying there. There were slightly less people running to and fro, but the noise was still a problem, and we were now in the middle of the second COVID wave, and these people were meeting up with big groups like crazy while I hadn't seen a soul in almost a year. Never mind the people at my work who were forbidden from even going to their own friggin' family. The whole thing was just ridiculous. My upstairs neighbor happened to film such a party across the street and had sent the clip to me. We were thinking about going to the press with our story, but weren't really sure if it would be a good idea. So I posted the clip of the party on the subreddit of our country to test the watering. It got quite some comments and upvotes, and it seemed most people were also sick of people disregarding the rules and having secret parties. After some talks with the upstairs neighbor, we decided to contact the press and simultaneously go up a step in the university hierarchy and contact the vice rector that had the power to start up a disciplinary case against the students. This person is one of 12 vice rectors for a total campus of about 15,000 students, so quite high up. Things moved fast. Local news actually picked up our story from Reddit and contacted me, and we gave some background info. They confirmed with the police that cops had been dozens of times to our address and across the street and weren't let in most of the time. We mentioned that the university was involved and that we hoped they would finally intervene. The next day, the piece was on their website. It went viral there and got promoted to the sites of most national newspapers. Its headline was sensational enough, mentioning the dozens of times police had showed up and also mentioning how healthcare workers were being kept up by selfish students. At the same time, the vice rector contacted us to take our statements, which we already had prepared up on paper, and informed us they would investigate and could possibly start up disciplinary actions. At the same time, more reporters were contacting me throughout the day, and we made sure to mention that to her and link the university the printed articles. The next day, while at work, I got a message from the upstairs neighbor that a film crew from the national news wanted our doorstep. He declined to talk to them, and I would have done the same since this was getting pretty big now, but they made a segment anyway. And sure enough, that night at 7, here was my street and a short section about cops standing in front of a closed door a dozen times in the local press. Cop talking about the troubles of closed doors. Best part about it was that a student from the offending frat house across the street had let the film crew in and said on camera exactly what we were accusing them of towards the university. That they had been having parties and didn't let the cops in, and that they had done it multiple times. No idea what made him think that was a good idea. Anyway, trying not to make a huge story even longer, the press died down sometime later, thank God, and the disciplinary action from the uni went through. Before the hearing, we sat down with the girls from our block and cleared some things up. We wanted to live like normal people together, and we tried to make some amends. Because we put in a kind of good word for them, they got the lighter end of the stick, 40 hours of community service and some probation. The guys across the street got 80 hours each, and each had to write us a letter of apology, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading every time I got one. Sad part is most of them sounded just like dumb young kids, but that was after getting called out on the news and being part of a disciplinary action. But we never wanted to escalate things this far. Some noise is to be expected when living in the same building, and we were never going to go to these extremes for some expected noises. But these people went to the extremes, and so we were forced to do the same. Rest of the year, a simple message on WhatsApp was enough to silence any noises we had coming from their apartment. If anything, I hope they learned that even very polite and chilled people can become very upset when presented with sleep deprivation and excessive noise. Short backstory. I'm suffering from social anxiety, and the key element to this story is I hate when strangers touch me. I get really uncomfortable, freaked out by it. That and the fact that I did take a couple self-defense classes a couple years ago. Not too much, but enough to know how to strike a punch. So this story happens in the local Go, to discount store. The dress code is a blue polo with the store's logo in a big yellow font on the back and a small logo on the front. It really should not be hard to spot when someone is an employee. I was wearing a classic white shirt at the time, not remotely in a hue of blue, and no bright yellow name tag on. Anyway, I was casually browsing the store, putting stuff in a cart I was carrying with me. At some point, I decide that I don't really want this random item. So naturally, I go to put it back because I'm a decent human being that doesn't leave stuff lying around randomly. In comes angry witch, AB from here on. AB proceeds to first snap her fingers and say something along the lines of, "Hey, you, come over here." Like so many others on this post, I ignore her, thinking she isn't talking to me because why would she? I'm obviously not an employee. Turns out a B didn't like this. At one point, I walk away from her, toward the registers, to pay for my goods. As I'm walking away, AB proceeds to walk up behind me, grab me by the shoulder, yell something like, "How dare you, blah, 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 blah. I am a self-entitled witch, yada, yada. You should not ignore me, squee, and spin me around." As I mentioned, I'm a no-touchy guy, and I'm not saying what I did is necessarily okay, but I acted on pure instinct from what I learned in self-defense. Mid-spin around, I yell, back off as loud as I can. A good tactic to use if you're being assaulted or harassed, as it works as a deterrent factor for the assailant, because you're not an easy target. And it also draws people's attention, thus giving you witnesses, and proceeded to give a mixture of a shove and a punch. The result of the punch was a bee falling flat on her back and proceeding to yell even more obscure things. Me, "What the actual heck are you doing, lady?" B, "What the heck? Did you just punch a paying customer? I demand to talk to your manager right now." Me, "What? I don't work here." B, "You filthy liar. You just assaulted me. I'll have you fired and arrested." Luckily, a manager was actually in the same aisle as we were in. Why she didn't ask him is beyond me. He's wearing the name tag. And I guess he heard the shouting because he came rushing over. Manager, "What's going on here?" AB, "Your rude employee just ignored me and then proceeded to assault me completely unprovoked. I demand that you fire him and call the police." Me, "Lady, I told you I don't work here. You assaulted me. Of course I'm going to defend myself." Manager, "This man doesn't work here." B, "Of course he is. He was putting things back on the shelves." Manager, "He still doesn't work here. Never has either as far as I know." AB, "I still demand that you call the police." Now this is where the malicious compliance comes in. The manager gave me a knowing look and a smile. Turns out the store has CCTV cameras pointing just down this aisle. Manager, "I'd be happy to call the police for you. I'm sure they'll be here soon." Me, "Look, man, I really just want to buy my stuff and go home." AB, "You're not going anywhere. You assaulted me. You're lucky I'm going to the police instead of beating the heck out of you." Mature, wow. Who would have imagined? Long story short, the manager called the police, and two nice gentlemen in uniforms were with us within 10 minutes, asking what happened. AB proceeds to give the story about how I completely ignored her because she had a question, and that I then proceeded to hit her and kick her. What the hell? I shoved her out of the way. And I tell my story where she keeps screaming about how I'm a filthy liar and she's a poor victim because she's a woman and all other sorts of nonsense. The manager tells us he can quickly pull up the footage from the CCTV, and the police were more than eager to see it. About 5 minutes later, we're all standing in the back looking at the footage. Officer, "Well, lady, it does look like you assaulted him and he simply defended himself. I don't spot him either punching or kicking you." This results in arguing that would most likely be flagged for excessive foul language, and it's just one giant mess of a discussion between her and the officers. And it ends with her lunging at one of the officers. Looks like she was going to slap him or something, and she was taken back to the station with them. Apparently, attempting to assault an officer isn't very popular with said officer. I pressed charges and also got a free coupon for approx $35 for the store, which was more than the total I was buying for, so I was quite happy with that. I saw the manager a couple times in the store afterward. Apparently, the crazy woman has also been banned from the store and ended up getting a sentence for trying to assault the officer, but he hasn't heard anything new either. It was all one big clusterfudge of what the heck is going on. This one happened to me a couple years back. I was down in Georgia camping for a spring vacation and happened to be wearing a nice red polo shirt and wandered into Target to pick up a few gifts for my family back in Canada. While perusing the back shelves, a harried-looking Target manager runs up to me and tells me to get in the back. I try to tell him, "Hey, I don't work here." And he interrupts me with a, "I don't care what you're doing, get in the back," and basically dragged me into the back area and over to one of the office conference rooms for a presentation from a regional exec. There were a lot of people in that office, and it seemed like Target had called in everyone who would normally be off shift into the office for this meeting, so they had a lot of people that some managers had never interacted with before. I'm guessing that's why I got dragged in. It was very obvious to me that anyone I made eye contact with knew I didn't work there, since they were all laughing at my bewildered "what am I doing here? Look, am I wearing the wrong pants?" Then the exec rolled in and ran an hour-long presentation about some variety of performance metrics, some new fast business action plan, or something that I tuned right out. I probably could have left if I actually made a real effort, but it would have caused a stink and definitely made the store look inept in front of their big boss, and I'm not that much of an a-hole. Also, the meeting was catered, so I took advantage of the free lunch. After it was done, we all filed out. I headed off to buy my purchases, and the cashier glanced at my shirt and gave me the employee discount. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.